Hello. Welcome to the Smile Revolution Show. We raise awareness to the healing power of a genuine smile. And I am Mindy Fradkin, also known as Princess Wow. I don't have to spell it anymore, it's right there. And I'm an entertainer, hat designer, writer. What else do I do? Ukulele player. I'm going to play actually my ukulele tonight. Singer, host of this show, obviously. This is my 166th show online since March 2020. But I had a radio show before, years back, where I was interviewing artists and musicians and authors. And so I'm really just been getting back into it. If you haven't seen my show before, I never know who's watching live or on replay. So, and I'm also just previewed my new show, solo show, Woodstock or Bust, how hat designers started a revolution, the smile revolution, obviously, and in London, and recently got back. And so working on where it's going to land next in Manhattan and up in the Hudson Valley. So stay tuned. I'll let you all know as soon as I figure all this stuff out. I just needed a break after my show in London. And which almost didn't happen. Okay. Well, anyway, I'll tell you all in a little bit. I will actually, maybe that's my story of the night. Okay. So I'm going to sing a song that Laura Molitor wrote, who is a dear friend from Austin, Texas, and she has a band with her twin sister, Rare Birds in Flight. And I'm going to play just a little bit of it. My scarf is like in the way. Okay, I'm just going to play a little bit of it. Give me a little smile and take my little smile, and we'll just smile a while so everyone can see. I may not know your name, but our world is the same. With all the fear and pain, a smile can set us free. Smile with me, laugh with me, love with me, smile with me. I think that's all I'm going to sing. Here's my ukulele, if you could see it. I'm just playing a little bit of it right now. Okay, so where am I going to put it? Okay, here we go. So, what can we do here? Oh, I usually have some quotes, and I'm going to read from a book I found. Tonight I have a really great show. Violet Snow, who's an author and journalist, freelance journalist and memoirist and fiction writer. It's about her book that she wrote based on her great grandmother's letters to March or to Mary. So I'll read you a little bit about her bio in a few minutes. But in the meantime, somebody wants to say hello. Wait a minute. Okay. Well, anyway, here's one of my dolls from my own likeness. Okay. She wanted to say hello. This is Lady Wow, I think. Lady Wow, is that your name? I think so. It's based on a photo of me and by Robbie Quinn, Street Unicorns book. And this is my newest edition, but she's not from my likeness. I don't look like this. However, isn't she cute? She's a pin. I got her in a children's shop in London. And she's like, I adopted her. She's part of the family now. And she goes with one of my dolls. And anyway, okay, so based on the fact that my show tonight is based in the early 1900s in New York, I wanted to find something from that era. Okay, so George Bernard Shaw, A Splendid Torch. He lived 1856 to 1950. Was an Irish dramatist, critic, and novelist. While Shaw was certainly the author of part of this passage I'm going to read in a minute, extracted from his preface to a speech at Brighton. I was just in Brighton recently in England. The remainder has not been verified in the text. Okay, so here it is. And most of you have probably heard this before. Well, I don't know, depending, but I heard it many years ago. This is the true joy in life, the being used for a purpose, recognized by yourself as a mighty one, the being a force of nature instead of a feverish, selfish little clod of ailments and grievances, complaining that the world will not devote itself to making you happy. I am of the opinion that my life belongs to the whole community, and as long as I live, it is my privilege to do for it whatever I can. I want to be thoroughly used up when I die, for the harder I work, the more I live. I rejoice in life for its own sake. Life is no brief candle for me. It's a sort of splendid torch which I have got hold of for the moment, and I want to make it burn as brightly as possible before handing it on to future generations. Such a great quote. Anyway, okay, so, and then Robert Louis Stevenson. Find out where joy resides and give it a voice far beyond singing, for to miss the joy is to miss all. And then Marcus Aurelius said, remember this, that very little is needed to make a happy life. And then Let a Smile Be Your Umbrella, song by Perry Como. Let a smile be your umbrella on a rainy day. Just let a smile be your umbrella on a rainy day. And if your sweetie cries, just tell her that a smile will always pay. Whenever skies are gray, don't you worry or fret. A smile will bring the sunshine and you'll never get wet. So let a smile be your umbrella on a rainy, rainy day. I need to learn that too, actually, because sometimes I forget to smile and sometimes I need you to smile at me to remind me to smile. So it's about giving and receiving smiles. Okay, so Violet Snow is a fiction writer, memoirist, and freelance journalist. Her articles have appeared in the New York Times, Disunion blog, Civil War Times, Woodstock Times, American Ancestors, The Record of Bergen County, New Jersey, Jewish Currents, and many other periodicals. Violet's fiction and memoir have been published in Otter Magazine, Pilgrimage, Tinker Street, and the podcast series The Strange Recital. To March or to Marry is her historical novel about suffrage and the women's club movement. Okay, and she is going to be on with her great-grandmother, she's playing her great-grandmother, Mary Wingebach. And here we go. Radkin. Yes, or Princess. You could call me Miss Wow, too.
Relevant to the suffragette movement or the women's clubs. But the letters to
Well, hello, Mary Wingebach.
Hello, very pleased to meet you, Miss Fradkin.
Yes, it is Miss Fradkin. Yes, or Princess. You could call me Miss Wow, too.
Miss Wow, excellent.
Yeah. Okay,
that's lovely.
Okay, thank you. So I have some questions for you today. I've heard that you've written a lot of letters to your mother, and you keep a journal.
Well, the journal actually was about my journey to Wales when I was 20 years old. So it's not exactly relevant to the suffragette movement or the women's clubs, but the letters to my mother, actually the letters were, what woman doesn't want to write to her mother and confide in her after all, correct?
Right, you're right.
And at that point, when I was writing the letters, my daughter was an infant, a young child, and my mother was so happy to hear the stories about her. And so I also told her what was going on in my day-to-day life, all the laundry and the cooking and the cleaning, and the women's club was a big part of my life at that point. So I often mentioned my trips to the club, the meetings, the papers I was writing, the reading I had to do in order to write about say Napoleon the Third or whatever my topic was for the week for that month. And so the reason I saved the letters was because I wanted them as a record for my daughter. I thought she would be happy to read about her childhood, since she wouldn't remember,
Right.
crawling across the floor and pulling turnip peels out of the trash and, all the cute things that she did. So in the process of preserving these stories for my daughter, I also kept a record of my women's club.
Oh, that's really neat. And so, before you got married, you were what you were a journalist? You worked at a magazine?
I was a secretary. I taught myself typewriting and Pitman shorthand. And I worked for a publisher, Dodd Mead, very important publisher in Manhattan. I worked for them for 10 years. And it was a wonderful job. I just loved meeting authors and, having friendships with editors and the very famous Frank Crowninshield, who was later the editor of Vanity Fair. He was my boss at the Bookman magazine, which was published by Dodd Mead. And so, yes, so I was a working woman.
But wasn't that rare in your era?
Well, it was somewhat unusual. Most women were married. I didn't marry until I was almost 30. Most women married.
That was very rare.
Yes, well, but see, I was accustomed to being independent. My parents, to be honest, were divorced. My father came home from the Civil War somewhat traumatized by his incarceration in Andersonville prison for 3 months. And at some point, there was some domestic violence that occurred, and my mother left him.
Wow.
So I was 14 years old. I was forced to find a way to make a living to help support my mother and my younger brother. And that's why I taught myself the skills. And actually, at that time, there was a groundswell of movement of women learning typewriting and shorthand. They called the typewriting machine like a piano for writing, because women's slender fingers were excellent. Often middle class women, which I was,
Right.
often they learned to play the piano as part of their education, and they had slim fingers and they were perfect for hitting typewriting keys. So
that's interesting.
it was yes, many women became secretaries in the 1880s, the period where I first learned typewriting and shorthand. Yes.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's really super interesting. Okay. So so then you got obviously you got married at 30.
Right. And of course I couldn't continue to work. I had to keep house for my husband.
Right.
But it was very monotonous. Oh, I can't tell you. As I wrote to my mother, particularly, I didn't mind cooking. Even, cleaning, keeping the rooms clean wasn't so bad. But as I wrote to my mother, the day I dread above all days, wash day. Oh, clouds of steam over a vat of boiling water. It was hellish, my dear. It was not what I wished to do. And what saved me was my women's club. I was introduced to the Athenaeum Club, and I got out of the house every week to commune with other women
on Tuesdays,
on
right?
Tuesday afternoons. And it was just delightful.
That's great.
And, we wrote reports, we did research, we educated ourselves, which was important because when the vote came along, women needed to know how to do research, how
Right.
to express themselves. It was important work that we were doing, and it was also such fun.
Oh, that's so great. That's really great. Now, so the women's clubs became really popular, huh? Were there a lot of
Yes.
women's clubs? Yeah.
Yes, yes. There was a club in every city and town in the country, more or less. It was a huge movement, and we so enjoyed, getting ourselves out of the house, out of our housekeeping world. And my club was a literary club.
Okay.
We focused on cultural issues, authors and artists and historical figures. Many clubs were more interested in community service, for instance, well, after all, we women, as caretakers of the home and the family,
Hmm.
we understood the needs of our children in this new industrial society. Trash in the streets, trash in the streets. Well, the government should do something about that, don't you think?
Hmm. Yes.
So
Yes.
men wouldn't think about that.
Right.
They don't care if their children are playing among garbage. They don't even see it.
Right.
Women were concerned. Women were concerned about tainted meat. Many of the clubs agitated for mandatory milk and meat inspection by the government.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
Spittoons were eliminated on the trains, for instance. Health issues, education issues. These were the issues that women's clubs
We're
addressed.
working. Oh, wow. So when did the women's club start?
Well, there were a few of them in the mid 1800s, but they mostly
Oh,
petered out. Men were very resistant to the
right.
idea of their
Right.
wives getting together.
And they didn't like that at the
They didn't
beginning.
particularly like it. It was a bit
Right.
of a struggle, but in 1868, just after the war, two very large clubs were started. One in New York City called
Hmm.
Sorosis,
Okay.
Sorosis, and meaning the flowering part of a plant,
Okay.
and the fruiting part,
Okay.
the flower. And this was a group of professional women. It was started by a journalist. She Charles Dickens came to New York City, and the press club was holding a reception for him. And Jane Crowley Cunningham asked for a ticket, and they laughed at her.
I know. Yeah.
And she was so appalled, she
Hmm.
started her own club and wouldn't let the men come to it.
Oh,
So that
wow.
was the
That's
Sorosis
really
Club.
neat. Okay.
And
That's
there were
great.
mostly writers, but there were also physicians and lawyers, women lawyers,
Oh, really? I didn't realize they had them that at that era.
ministers. There
Oh,
were
wow.
not many,
Uh-huh.
but
But in
forceful
New York
women
City, New
became
York
lawyers.
City, ahead of the
And
curve.
right. And at the same time, a club was formed in Boston called
Okay.
the New England Women's Club, and that was very oriented towards community service. Julia Ward Howe was a founding member. She was the writer of Battle Hymn of the Republic. So that was the other big club. So those two big clubs started the movement.
I see.
And then Jane Crowley was instrumental in encouraging the development of clubs in other towns around the country. She would give lectures
Oh,
and talk
that's
about
neat.
clubs. There
Okay.
were books published on how to start a women's club, how to
Mhm.
run a women's club, uh,
Wow.
how to, topics for, you know, for meetings, for a year's lecture, reports. It was there were ads in the books for singers who might come and entertain a club or
Uh-huh.
give lectures to a club. It
Now,
was
did women have to pay with their dues?
Yes, usually there were dues. Ours, we paid $2.50 a year
Okay.
uh, for our club. Of course,
Okay.
you know, our rent was $5 a month, so you get an
Right.
idea of how much that was. It wasn't
Right.
exorbitant.
And so how many people are in your group? Are you still in the group?
Oh yes, I would never give up my club.
You're always in
My
the of course,
Yes,
yes.
my club has about 10 members. Some clubs are
Okay.
much larger. For
Okay.
instance, in Albany, there's a big club. They bought a clubhouse. They bought a building to serve as their clubhouse. Some
Wow.
clubs have over 100 members, but ours is quite small, quite local. And
And you're
these
in the
women,
Bronx?
among my dearest friends, yes, North
You're in the
Bronx,
Bronx.
Wakefield.
You're in
Yes,
okay.
Wakefield, very close to Mount Vernon.
Okay. 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 Great. Okay. Now, um, some suffrage. I'm going to talk about the suffragettes.
Yes.
They're fighting for the states. Some suffragettes are fighting for state suffrage, and others are focused on a national amendment. Did the suffs fighting on the state level feel that a national amendment was too far out of reach? I mean, do you have friends who were suffragettes? I think you do, right?
I do know some suffragettes, yes. I I am not really close friends with them. We have an intrinsic difference of values. I mean, I certainly believe that it would be of benefit to women and to the country for women to be able to vote. But I am not going to march in the street and shout and carry signs. It strikes me as very unladylike, you know?
Right, right.
I just don't approve of that.
Okay,
But I write letters to newspapers, and
okay.
ultimately, I believe that women need to have the vote. However, and many women's clubs, in fact, in our club, we don't really discuss
Oh, that's right. You
suffrage
don't
in our
talk about
meetings.
it. Okay.
It's too controversial a topic, and
Radical. It's
we want to
radical.
keep harmony in our group. You know, we don't want to get into arguments, political
I
arguments.
see.
It's not worth it. However, yeah, so my understanding is that Miss Susan B. Anthony
Uh-huh.
wrote an amendment, a national amendment to the federal constitution, and she was trying to get it through Congress year after year, and it completely failed. It wasn't getting anywhere. So at
Okay.
some point, as new states entered the union, many of them permitted women's suffrage. Wyoming was the first one.
Oh.
Wyoming allowed women to vote in all their state and local elections.
And what year, do you know what year that was?
Goodness, I don't quite remember.
Late
I'm sorry.
1800,
It
maybe
was in the
late 18.
mid to late 1800s, I think mid
Okay.
1800s.
Okay.
So, you know, pretty soon there were 8 states that allowed women to vote. So there was a section of the suffrage movement that decided, well, let's just focus on the states. We'll go one at a time. However, there were states such as Ohio and Michigan where the liquor interests were very strong. And since
Okay.
temperance is largely a women's movement, in
Oh,
those
right.
states,
Of course.
they did not want women to be able to vote because they feared that it would be the end of alcohol.
Oh.
So they lobbied very strongly against women's suffrage. And at some point, Miss Alice Paul, the Quaker suffragist,
Right.
made a decision that she was going to work for a national amendment. And she
Okay.
did, and she succeeded. She, I believe, is going to succeed. She's a powerful woman.
Okay. Okay. Oh, that's really neat. Oh, that's cool. And how did the crises in your life and other women's lives shape the so-called women's movement?
Well, I consider the women's clubs part of the women's movement. The suffragists, of course, think that we're boring and not radical enough. However,
Right.
I believe that my isolation after marriage forced me to join a women's club, and it was the best thing I could have done. And I believe that the women's clubs really changed society. First of all, I don't think the suffragettes would be having success if the women's clubs had not changed men's attitudes about letting women out of the house. And certainly the clubs have trained us to speak in public. We practice by speaking to each other, and many club women have become adept at public speaking, are beginning to join, work in business and government. So I believe that that was my personal crisis that contributed to the women's movement. In other cases, in my case, well,
What about birth control?
that's what I am thinking
I know
about.
that's, yeah.
Having had a daughter and then less than a year later, two twin sons, I was very interested in birth control.
And it was illegal.
Right. It was made illegal by an insufferable man who prevented Margaret Sanger from publishing her information about birth control and sending it through the mail.
Right.
However, Mrs. Sanger went ahead, opened a clinic, and began to educate women and forced the courts to deal with this issue. So I consider the birth control issue a part of the women's rights movement that in early 1918 succeeded in giving doctors the right to educate women about birth control and provide them with birth control devices.
Right, because your husband is a musician, right?
Yes.
And it's been hard for you because it would be very hard for you to have many, many children.
Oh, yes.
Right.
We could not possibly afford a
Right.
whole
That's what I'm
brood of
saying. Right.
children.
Yeah.
And personally, I want to be able to give my children, the kind of attention they deserve. If I had 9 children,
Which
like
some
my
people do.
washwoman has, my washwoman has 9 children.
Right.
How I feel so for her and for the children. If she had access to birth control, she would not have to worry so much about feeding them all. She wouldn't have to be going through pregnancy after pregnancy. This is the sort of issue that propels us into women's rights. Don't you
Right.
agree?
Yep. Oh yeah, definitely. Absolutely. Now, do you think that the suffragettes and the club women, well, obviously you're changing society.
Oh, absolutely, yes, we are.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so your future now, your future great granddaughter, I think maybe on some level, that one of your future generation, one of your future great grandchildren,
One of my descendants.
your
Yes.
descendants will be a writer and write a book about your life and about all of this.
I do think that's going to happen, yes.
And with everything you're leaving your family.
Yes, I'm confident that she will find my letters, that they will be preserved, and that she will have plenty of information to write about.
That's great. That's really neat. So, Violet Snow is the great granddaughter.
Yeah, one great
granddaughter of Mary Wingebach, who we were just speaking to. And now we are changing gears and speaking to Violet Snow.
Oh, one moment, please. I'll go get her.
I'll go get her.
Can you just speak a little bit, and I'll be back in a minute.
Okay. So I've been of the good fortune to meet Violet Snow in Woodstock, and I've read this book, To March or to Marry. And Violet, it's a novel based on her one great grandmother's letters, who we were just speaking to, Mary Wingebach. And actually, this is her right here, this picture right there. I don't know if you can see it, but that's her who we were just talking to. And the book is absolutely amazing. And Violet is a novelist, journalist, and family historian, blessed with we know, abundance of artifacts passed down by her ancestors, who we were just speaking to. And Violet lives in the Catskill Mountains of upstate New York with her husband, Sparrow, who's also a writer, an amazing poet and writer. Hi, Violet.
Hi, Mindy.
Hi, good to see you.
Likewise.
Yeah, so your book's amazing. It's absolutely incredible. And you're just such a good writer. I mean, it's just so easy to read, and it's so fascinating. And so you've been so fortunate that you have your grandmother, your great grandmother, who we were just speaking to. She left you all these letters and the pictures. It's amazing.
It is.
It really is. It's incredible. And today I was reading, on your blog. Oh, wait, I want to post this actually. You have a blog, News of My Ancestors, on WordPress, which is amazing. And she left you pictures, letters, everything. It's just incredible. It was just made for you.
Sometimes it feels like she was really like writing for me. And also Mary and I have a lot in common. Like, we both traveled abroad at a young age, early 20s. We both came back and ended up in Manhattan. We both worked in publishing. I feel such a kinship with her.
And it's amazing.
Yeah.
It really is. It's an extraordinary thing. I mean, I have nothing about my ancestors, really, very little. And I just look at you and I'm like, it's amazing.
I know. I feel so lucky that I have all this material. And then as a writer, I had to do something with it. So
definitely, absolutely. And the book it was such easy reading and so fascinating. And it really puts you in that era and what women went through, and with the birth control. And it's fascinating to learn it, because I never knew about the women's clubs.
Right. I had never heard about them until I came across them in her letters.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, what is this? So I looked it up, and I found a book, a scholarly book that was written in the 80s, where a woman really dug into records of the women's clubs and news stories. And it turns out it was this huge movement, like 1.5 million women across the country were in clubs. And there are still some clubs. They're different now. They're more focused on charity work, but
right.
They still
exist.
There's still forces in their communities. And
okay.
I actually spoke to some clubs when I was selling the book.
Oh, yeah, right. So you went to some of these clubs to promote. Oh, I see. Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, they loved the book. They were really nice and enthusiastic about it. Yeah.
And so how long did it take you to? It's probably over the years. You've been working on it for a long time before you published it.
No, I only spent about a year working on it. But I had written a lot before that about my ancestors, trying to find the right format and use the material about them. And then suddenly I had the idea to write about suffrage and women's clubs. It was actually in It was a State of the Union address. Remember, I think it was in, I guess it was 2018, 2019. Trump was giving the State of the Union address, and the women, the women in Congress sat together all dressed in white in
Yeah.
solidarity with the suffragettes.
Right.
And I'm watching that, and I'm thinking, I could write a book about suffragettes, and the kind of tension between, from my research, I knew that there was tension between the women's clubs
Right.
and the suffrage organizations, because their values weren't exactly the same.
Right.
And you know, the women's marches, after Trump was first elected, after the first year, there was a lot of dissension, you know, like some groups seceded, and there was a lot of argument, and people were saying, oh, women can't even agree. How can they, you know, how can they make progress? They don't even have solidarity. Well, every movement has disagreements. Every movement,
Right.
in any movement, you need different points of view. And you know, like they both support each other, even as they bring in different points of view. And I just thought this would be so interesting to write about this. And plus, I'm interested in that time period of the early 1900s, when my great grandmother was, you know, coming of age and being, you know, having kids and being out in the world. So it just seemed like everything just sort of came together really fast.
That's so cool. Well, have you written other books before?
I have. The only one, I mean, I ended up, actually, this book, to be honest, is self-published.
Right.
And through Epigraph Books. And I had self-published a memoir some years ago, short memoir of my travels through India, when I gave away all my money and became a wandering sadhu beggar for 6 weeks.
I didn't know about that.
Yeah, well, it's pretty weird, but I wrote it up. I wrote about it, and so I thought, oh, I'll publish this, you know.
Okay.
But I've written many books that have not been published for one reason or another. Not that I haven't tried, but the publishing business, you know, you have to be a shark to get into the publishing business, and I'm not tough enough, maybe.
Okay.
But yeah, I love
people. Well, some people self-publish, and they can publishers, if they take note of it, sometimes that happens, and they can pick it up.
Yeah.
So if you get enough traction, it's just, I've seen it happen. So it can happen, but it may take time. Right. You never know.
Right.
So what, it was at 1920? That's why we're celebrating at 2020, right? Because 1920 was when we got the vote.
Right. That I believe the amendment was passed in 1919, but then it had to be ratified by 2/3 of the states, and that was completed in 1920. Yeah.
Okay. And then people can get your book where? On Amazon. It's on Amazon, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's on Amazon, or they can get it from you directly.
Or it's also on, I think it's called bookshops.org. That's another book selling website.
Okay, good. And the information, I'm sure, is on your website too, right?
Yeah, if you go to my website, there
everything's on there, right? Okay, good.
Mm-hmm.
And is there anything else you want to talk about?
Well,
that we didn't mention about your book?
Yeah, I just want to say, you know, my great grandmother is a big part of the book. I mean, one of the two main characters is based on her, but there's an equal weight to the suffrage side of the story. And as I did my research, I discovered how incredibly of the suffragists were. I mean, getting arrested, going on hunger strikes,
prison.
Being in prison. I mean, it's pretty amazing.
It is amazing. It is. It really is.
And it's well documented, because the suffragists were usually upper class women. The women's clubs were middle class. It was this new middle class, which was a new thing in society.
Right.
And that's where the women's clubs mainly came from. whereas the suffragettes tended to be wealthy women and idealistic, educated women.
Right.
And so some of them wrote books about their experiences. So it's well documented. There's a lot of information, and I put a lot, but we don't usually hear about it, even though it's there. So I put a lot of that in the book, and it's really inspiring and pretty amazing to read about what women went through to get the vote.
Right. I know. Really, it is amazing. I learned so much about that era and what women were going, and then even about the birth control. It just, you learn, so you really get into like detail, like you really feel like you're in that era, which is really neat.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. It's a very interesting time
It
period.
really is an fascinating topic, the whole thing, and just like the way you wrote it, everything is really great. So anyway, well, it's really fascinating, and it was great to meet your great grandmother today.
Well, thank you. She loves to talk, so she likes to get that attention. So I appreciate that you let her on. She's just unstoppable, Mary.
She's part of your whole journey, so she has to be part of your talks.
Yes,
I know. So it's really neat. So okay, well, anyway, thank you so much for taking the time for your great grandmother to be on, and you today, and I'm looking forward to hearing. I'm sure my audience is going to enjoy hearing all about it too, because it is such a great topic. But I just want to say one thing. I mean, I know that in the Constitution, we still don't have equal rights.
Right.
Which is hard to believe, even in this era.
Yeah, and Alice Paul, actually, after women got the vote, Alice Paul sat down and wrote the Equal Rights Amendment. And it's that same document keeps getting this close to getting,
I know.
Congress, and it's amazing. But
it is amazing, isn't it? It's amazing that we still aren't equal in the concept. I know. I didn't know that till I think 2020, when I went to some, event, a suffragist event, and I read that. I was like shocked.
Yeah.
I know.
It's crazy.
It's ridiculous. Anyway, thanks so much. And
thank you for having us on.
Book to March, and I love the title too, To March or to Marry. So I have to ask you really quick. So the suffragettes, a lot of them didn't get married?
It's not, well, some didn't. Most of them, a lot of them did. And some of the club women did march, but a lot of them didn't. And it's just a matter of emphasis. It's like, which was the priority for the two groups of women? Was it to be out there on the front lines, or was it to be working, from within the marriage, within the women's club,
Right.
Of course, there's no strict division, but it just illustrates the conflict of values that,
right,
in the case of the book, interferes with the friendship of these two women who are close. But when one of them gets into the suffrage movement, it just makes it much more difficult for them to stay close. So
right.
Their struggle through the whole book is they want to be friends, but it's hard.
Right. Okay. Well, the title is very captivating. It's really a great title.
Thanks.
So, anyway, I hope the book goes far, because it should. And I know you have you've been going to different events, selling them and everything. And I hope that some of my listeners are going to get the book as well, because it is so great. And continued success with it. And thanks for being on my show.
Thank you.
Okay. And I'll talk to you soon. Okay. Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. I hope you enjoyed that fascinating interview with Violet Snow's great grandmother and Violet Snow. So next Monday at 8:00 Eastern Time, I've got Robinson Treacher on. He's a musician, and I just met him actually this weekend. He opened for Willie Nile and he's amazing. He is so amazing, and he's got a big personality. So it's going to be a really fun interview, and he's so talented. I'm just like a big fan. And so anyway, stay tuned. I've got some other interesting interviews coming up. And so lots of love. And who wants to say goodbye? Oh, Gumby. Gumby wants to give you a big hug and a smile and a wave. Actually, a wave. This one, this little baby one, is a wave. Okay, I'll see you all next week, Monday at 8, and it's always on replay. But I'm on live and on Mondays at 8. So it's my new schedule, and I'll talk to you later. So keep smiling, keep sweet. Join the smile revolution. And here I go on my credits. It's called the smile revolution that comes, goes round and back to you. So smile, 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 a simple smile.